They did it. The OU men's basketball team actually did it. They are in the NCAA tournament as a 9 seed, selected as a 9 seed during the selection show. And after a season that looked like it was going to be a repeat of the last 3 years under Porter Moser, a season that looked like it was going to end before it officially ended, OU has done enough to make the NCAA tournament. And now we actually have real postseason games to analyze and talk about with this program. And we're going to do that here on another episode of In the Paint, a basketball video series provided by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. I am Jesse Crittenden. I am joined by Brody Lusk. And Brody, I, like many other people, just thought once this team lost 5 in a row during that stretch in the middle of conference play, it looked like we had seen this movie before. And the fact that we're here and it's not only OU making the tournament but being a 9 seed, it's just how do you properly summarize what's happened over the last couple of weeks with this basketball team?
I mean, resiliency. I think that's the main thing we've seen. Yeah, I mean, after that LSU loss, it kind of just the way it happened, it seemed like we were going on the trend of like collapsing late in the season. But what we've seen is they've actually been playing their best basketball recently. Like, they've won four out of their last three, and if you look at, or out of their last seven, and if you look at those three losses, two of them are to Otega Owe, one of them is to Sean Padula. Each of them, one possession losses. I think we've seen this team play their best basketball, and I think that's one a credit to Porter Moser and this coaching staff for being able to keep a team that had lost five straight and had lost a game, just the way they lost it to LSU. Keep that team engaged. A lot of teams, once you're 3-9 in conference play, you're not getting to 6-12 and getting some of the wins that they got down the stretch. And so I think one, it's a credit to Moser, but it's also a credit to this team, right? To be able to stay engaged and come back, just when everyone had them out, and rightfully so, they were able to do what they needed to do to get into the NCAA tournament. It's incredibly impressive, and it's surprising to just about everybody.
No, they're like you mentioned. I mean, they're 4-3 in their last 7 games, and those 3 losses are games that if the ball bounces their way, they could be 5-2, 6-1, 7-0. And I think the
Yep.
one of the most impressive things is that, and obviously it's not a good enough moral victory to just make the tournament, right? They're not going to be satisfied with that. But just looking at what actually happened the last couple of weeks, getting some of these massive wins when they really needed it. It's not just Missouri, it's not just Mississippi State. It's going to Texas, a place that I mean, OU has not played Texas well at all in the Porter Moser era. They had not beaten them. They especially had not played well in Austin. And you go into Austin, the regular season finale against a Texas team that's also on the bubble.
Yep.
And frankly, just as an aside, don't know how they made the tournament field. But both OU and Texas are on the outside looking in. A massive game. OU wins that game, and then to remove any doubt, because it's still up in the air, but their tournament status, right? Going in the SEC tournament, they find a way to get a really good win against a Georgia team. It's just, I mean, you mentioned resiliency, but and there's a lot of reasons why they've gotten to this point over the last couple of weeks, and we'll talk about some of them, but you really do have to give credit to Porter Moser and this coaching staff for all of the criticisms and for all the faults, which are still reasonable, right? Even with OU
Yeah.
making the tournament, there's still reasonable criticisms. I didn't see it. I didn't think this team was going to have it. And that makes me wonder if, I mean, this is a really tough draw, and we'll talk about their draw in a second, but it makes me not want to count out this team.
No.
Like it really
Yeah.
does, right?
Yeah, it's that reason, and there's just multiple reasons why you like. It's just like you don't really want to count this team out. But I definitely think like the past, just the fact that before the Missouri game, we are sitting there like, okay, they have to go 2-0 this week. It's hard to go 2-0 any week in the SEC. Matter of fact, okay, you got to beat number 15 Missouri, then you got to go beat Texas, who you've never beat under Porter Moser. I think just the fact that they did that, but also how well they played in the SEC tournament, I think really like the fact that they're playing their best basketball, you have to look at Oklahoma and say, okay, they could make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. Now, the draw, I definitely think, in my opinion, the draw that they got kind of minimizes that a little bit. But just the fact that, you look at Jeremiah Fears playing his best basketball. Oklahoma, just as a team, they're a good three-point shooting team. And Porter Moser, last time he was in the tournament, took Loyola very far. So the thing with Porter Moser is we just haven't seen him be able to get into the NCAA tournament. Now we do. I think, there's a lot of factors going into it, but I definitely think Oklahoma is a team that is playing their best basketball at the right time.
Well, and we should talk about part of it you just mentioned there, and it's Jeremiah Fears. And
Yeah.
and I'll be honest with you. I mean, we said during the non-conference play that it was great the way he started as a true freshman, the draft prospect, his potential, it's all there, but it was going to be, what's going to happen when he has a couple of rough games in conference play, and he did.
Yeah.
He that first month of conference play was pretty rough for Jeremiah. I think you put the tweet out yesterday about what he's done over the last 7 games, over 22 points per game, over 5 assists a game, or 5 rebounds a game. His shooting has been fantastic. The way he played down the stretch, the way he played against Georgia, and even Kentucky, it's just. I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you, man. I didn't see it that his at least right now, or at least a few weeks ago, I didn't see the draft potential. I didn't see the, especially the draft lottery potential. It looked really rough there for a little bit, but as a true freshman, when this team looked down and out, I just
Yeah.
it's so impressive what he's done. He looks like a lottery guy. That's what he's looked like, and to kind of put this team on his back, it's just what his not only what has stood out to you about Jeremiah, but how important is that going into the tournament, considering that, yeah, it's great OU won the tournament that or got into the tournament. That's the ultimate goal, but now you want to win games, right? So just what's
Yeah.
standing out about Jeremiah?
Yeah, you mentioned it. Like to have a freshman be able to come in and do that at the usage rate at which his team, is relying on him is super impressive. And also, I don't really mention this a lot because I kind of feel like every single broadcast they talk about it, but he is technically supposed to be still in high school. Like
Right.
he is younger than all these other freshmen that you're seeing out there. So to see him come in and play the way he has, like I remember some conversations before the season started having with different people and they're like, man, like Jeremiah Fears, like he's the real deal, could really be like a lottery pick this year. And it was kind of like, okay. And then you see him do that against Michigan, with the 4-point shot and his play non-con, you're kind of like, all right, like I see it. And then he has that tough stretch in conference play. But then for him to be able to bounce back and play the way he has recently, I think you're like, okay, yeah, he's definitely a lottery pick. He's definitely someone who's going to have a long and great career in the NBA. But I think really what has stood out is, one, he's limited his turnovers recently. I know he had 5 versus
Yes.
Georgia, but he came back in the second half, had 0. That helps a lot. But the biggest game was the Missouri game. They are, one of the top 10 teams forcing steals. Jeremiah Fears turned it over one time in 34 minutes. Extremely impressive for a freshman guard to do. Secondly, his 3-point shooting, it was rough against Kentucky, but it has been better at times. Like Georgia, he shot the ball really well, made 4 3-pointers. And so that was, I mean, he's shooting like 20, I want to say like 28%, something around there from three on the year. But for him to be able to start hitting some threes, we saw those flashes in the SEC tournament. They've been impressive. And then also, I just think his ability to get to the rack and draw a foul is just something little that really helps this team. When they need a bucket, Fears can get to the line and get two. When he's not shooting the three well, like we saw against Kentucky, he can get to the free throw line and then get going from there. So yeah, I think it's been extremely impressive. His field goal percentage has been very good. Just the shots he's getting. But like his resiliency kind of goes into this team's resiliency. We see him against Kentucky missing a ton of shots, like 0 for 6 from three to start the game. And then he just keeps shooting, keeps shooting. You can tell the confidence is there. Sometimes that can wager with a true freshman in the SEC play. But yeah, just very impressive in all those different aspects from Fears.
Well, it's kind of the two things, just quickly to build on that. I mean, even they lost that Kentucky game in the SEC tournament, but it's you saw the two things that if you're wanting to be bullish on this program and their chances in the NCAA tournament, you saw it in that Kentucky game. It was just the ability to not quit. They're down
Yeah.
12 with 3 minutes left and somehow take a 1 point lead with 6 seconds left. So it's not only just that resiliency and the fact that this team just doesn't give up, but on top of that, the reason why they're able to take that 1 point lead is because of Jeremiah Fears. They get the steal late.
Man,
They
yeah.
get it to Jeremiah. He gets to the rim for a layup. Like those are the two things. If you want to say this team can do something, it's their resiliency and it's Jeremiah Fears playing like he has, right?
Yeah, that whole last minute of the Kentucky game, he had 2 made free throws, makes a 3-point shot to cut it to 3, gets a steal and then gets an assist to make it a 1-point game, gets another steal, slows down the clock and gets a bucket at the rim. That's just insanely impressive stuff. And it sucks because, now that they lost that game, you're talking about it a lot less. Man, like if they would have won that minute stretch would have been huge. But yeah, I agree. I put a column out on ouinsider.com earlier or Sunday, yesterday. And the main reason I said the two main reasons were, the way they've been playing lately and then Jeremiah Pierce. Like you win in March with good guard play. If you listen to all these, selection show breakdowns when people are talking about sleeper teams, it's okay, this team has really good guard play. And so I do think Oklahoma has that with Fears. I think that'll benefit them a lot.
No, I agree, and it's going to be important when you go into how what OU is looking at with their draw here, and that's what we need to talk about because I mean, in a lot of ways, as impressive as it is that the way they ended the season and how well they're playing right now, this draw is not a reward for them.
How surprised were you to see them get a 9?
I was pretty, yeah. I mean, I thought 10 seed, I thought 11 seed,
Yeah,
you know, um, and I thought like I knew when they beat Georgia, they were in, but I thought, man, they're going to be one of those last couple teams,
yeah,
right? But it's not only just being a 9 seed; it's having to go to Raleigh. That's one.
yeah,
That's a pretty decent trip for them. And then two, I know this hasn't been the same UConn team, but you match up with UConn, 8 seed UConn in round one. That is really tough. And if you get past them, your reward is playing number one Florida or 1 seed Florida, who might be the best team in college basketball.
yeah.
So I don't know, man. What are your feelings on this draw? And is this just a moral victory for OU to even get to the tournament, or I mean, is there how do you feel about this draw right now?
Uh, the draw it's not good. Like you look at Texas's draw, you look at even like Arkansas's draw, they're better than OU's draw. Like any 10 seed, 6 or 10 seed, 11 seed draw would have been better. And I know it, sometimes you hear people say I'd rather not beat Kentucky so that OU doesn't get a 9 seed. And I kind of feel like, what, you should want the best seed as possible, but there is some merit to like as a 6 seed or as an 11 seed, you're playing a 6 seed and a 3 seed, not a 8 seed then a 1 seed.
Right.
Also, I feel like this draw could have been worse for Oklahoma because if you look at the different 8 seeds, you have, I want to say Louisville, and which I don't know how they got an 8 seed, but I don't think the committee would have put OU up against Louisville because they've already played. You have Mississippi State, who they're definitely not going to put OU up against conference team, and then it's UConn or Gonzaga, and Gonzaga's a top 8 team in KenPom. So UConn definitely a more favorable 8 seed matchup, but then you're looking at playing one of the hottest teams in basketball, probably the hottest team in basketball, Florida, should you beat UConn. And you mentioned it, defending national champions, two-time national champions. Like it's not the same UConn team. It's still a Dan Hurley led UConn team. That's still like it's going to be a toss up.
No, it is, and not to mention that one of the things that we should have talked about is one of the things that was impressive for Oklahoma down the stretch is they were without Sam Godwin, who
Yeah.
did not who I said it more than anybody else. Sam Godwin was borderline. I'm not even borderline. He was kind of unplayable for the first few weeks of conference play, and then when he got
Yes.
injured, he had not only been playing his best basketball, he had been an asset to
Yeah.
this team. So as impressive as it is that I mean, and that's not also to mention Jeff, Jadon Jones and the fact that they haven't been whole all year. But I'm wondering how much is that going to hurt them coming into this game against UConn specifically. And we'll talk more about Florida if OU can get past UConn,
Yeah.
but OU's not whole. At the same
No.
time, they're playing as well as they have all year right now. I know you've done a little bit of background on UConn. Just I mean, how do you feel like OU matches up with UConn in this first round game?
Well, I think a couple things like UConn is not great defensively. Like they're actually not good defensively. So I do think that kind of bodes well for Oklahoma. They ranked 94th in defensive efficiency, which is, one of the lowest defensive efficiency ratings Oklahoma's played since non-conference play. Even like LSU and South Carolina rank higher. Then you look at the 3-point difference. OU offensively is a top 35 3-point shooting team. Look at UConn's 3-point difference, and it's in like the 250s. And the only high major team Oklahoma has played this season that ranks that low is Providence. And so you're seeing a team that really can't defend that well. They can't defend the 3-point line at all. But then you look at their shot blocking numbers and they're second. And so I think, remember we talked about this, but the times Oklahoma's guards struggled the most were against those good long shot blocking teams. And so to me, I kind of look at it like on one hand, it's a good matchup because Oklahoma shoots the three ball well. UConn does not defend it well. On the second hand, they've got really good shot blockers that I think could really give Oklahoma's guards a problem.
I'm glad you mentioned the defensive part of it though, because and look, this is not going to be easy. UConn has championship pedigree, we know that, but it's also one of the things about the way OU's played the last few games is we think about Porter Moser teams as being so defense heavy, right? And that was the problem the last 3 years is their defense was great and their offense was terrible. That has not been the case
No.
the last few games.
Yeah.
Which some of these games have just been so fast paced and they're facing really, really good offenses, but it hasn't been the defense. It's been their offense, man. I mean, they've scored at least 80 or more I think in 6 of the last 7 games. And the one game they
Yeah.
didn't score over 80, they scored 76 at Texas in a win. And so I actually wonder, and they're doing this against SEC defenses that are some
Yeah.
of the best in the country. I do wonder. I mean, they don't have Sam Godwin, obviously, but Mo Wagee has been fantastic the last couple of games. They're getting some good shooting. They're getting some good scoring. Jeremiah Fears has been playing the way he has. I don't worry that much about Oklahoma's offense, which is weird to say about a Porter Moser team. I'm more curious about can their defense hold up against UConn's offense, which I mean, I know you I don't know. What do you I mean, would you be more worried about OU's offense or more worried about OU's defense?
Probably the defense, right? Like the one aspect is, yeah, they can shot block so well that there could be a problem, but I'm more worried about their offense. I mean, they have, Liam McNeely, Solomon Ball. They have some good pieces offensively that really could give Oklahoma some problems. And yeah, like you mentioned, like Oklahoma's defense has just not been great. Like we think about Porter Moser teams in the past, and it's, last possession of the game, you have a group of five just lockdown defenders on the floor. I don't think they have that this year. I mean, like, say what you want about that last possession against Kentucky. If they have two good defenders who can, slide their feet and close out a trap, then the game's over. They just defensively, I just don't think they have the guys this year to have an elite defense, and we've seen that. So I do think that I would be more worried about Oklahoma's defense compared to their offense. I think their offense, like I think you're going to get good play out of Jeremiah Fears. I think you're probably going to see someone like a Bryson Goodine have a good night just because UConn doesn't defend the three well. I do wonder, can Oklahoma slow down these guys UConn has, like a Liam McNeil, like a Solomon Ball, enough to be able to go get a win? I think that, yeah, that's the biggest question.
What's going to be key for Oklahoma going into this matchup, especially offensively? I mean, I
Yeah.
think you and I both. I mean, Jeremiah Fears has not only been playing well. I think he can play well against this team.
Yep.
Jalen Moore's been a little bit more up and down, but we know how important he is to this offense. Outside of those two guys, what guy in this rotation for OU heading into this game that you're thinking is maybe an X factor for this game, or hey, if he plays well, that could be the difference between OU losing and OU advancing to the round of 32.
Yeah, I think one guy that comes to mind would be Kobe Elvis because he has really put together some
There
good
it is.
games recently. He
Mhm.
scored 12 points against Kentucky, the most he's scored since January 11th. And he's shot the ball well. He's provided another good shooting option. And so you look at UConn, a team that I think the number one thing Oklahoma needs to do, shoot the ball well. And we've seen, that Georgia game in the first half was a great example of how well Oklahoma can shoot the three. And so I think if you have Kobe Elvis hitting threes and all of a sudden you're one doing what he's done the past couple games, taking pressure off Jeremiah Fears, but two, it gives you another three-point shooter alongside Bryson Goodine, who is one of the best three-point shooters in the country. So I think if you get good play from Elvis, then I definitely think that that'll help. Also, I do think it's worth noting. I think a week off will really help Jalen Moore because
Mhm.
that knee injury that he got banged up in the Ole Miss game obviously wasn't enough to hold him out. But I do think he's been dealing with that a little bit to where we haven't seen that 20-point performance from him. Maybe you get that against UConn.
A really good point, and I'm really glad you mentioned Kobe, who it feels like that transition to the bench was pretty tough for him those first
Yeah,
couple of weeks. But I really think over the last week or so he's been better. He's been more of a boost off the bench.
he has. Yeah,
He really
yeah, and
has.
so has Glenn Taylor the past couple
Yeah.
games. He's been doing some good stuff.
Yeah. I think just to add on to that, especially if Sam Godwin can't go in this UConn game, I'm really curious about now not only how Wagee plays. He was really good in that Georgia game. I think 12 points in that, in the start in that game. We saw Luke Northweather have a couple of good moments in that Kentucky game, but I'm curious, how does OU handle that big man rotation? And one thing, and I'm glad you mentioned maybe this week, having a week off would be good for Jalen Moore. We really haven't seen, even with Godwin out, we haven't really seen OU go to that Jalen Moore at the 5 lineup very much at all, really this entire
Yeah.
year. I wonder, do they look at that at all, even with UConn size, or do you hope Mo can have, one of his good games. Maybe Luke can get you a 3 or 2 off the bench and hope that that's enough. I wonder how this coaching staff
Yeah.
handles that dilemma.
It's also going to be interesting to see what happens with Sam Godwin because it does seem like that there is a chance he can return. But the thing is, if you do get him back, are you looking at a situation where, he's definitely not going to be at his best, probably can give you some spot minutes here or there, which I think still makes the key be Mo Wagee. Like you
Right.
mentioned that Georgia game, he was like the fact that, or the first game Godwin was out Texas, he couldn't stay out of foul trouble, only played like 12 minutes. And then Georgia doesn't record a single foul in the first half and plays, in my opinion, his best game of the year. So that to me, can Mo Wagee stay out of foul trouble, regardless of if you get Sam Godwin back for a little bit of minutes here or there. I definitely think that's key. But also, like you mentioned, I do think having a week to prepare that lineup with Jalen Moore at the 5 and Glenn Taylor at the 4, I definitely think that's probably going to be something Oklahoma looks to do a little bit more. Even if it's just for, a stretch here or there just to see, probably worth looking at just with how much they had to rely on Luke Northweather against Kentucky.
It's exciting to just be talking about
Yeah,
postseason basketball, man.
it
This is my
is.
fourth year on the men's basketball beat, and this is the first time I'm getting to actually analyze an NCAA tournament game. It's just
Yeah,
it's nuts. We'll have all kinds of content on OUinsider.com, both leading up to Friday's game against UConn, but also obviously from the game against UConn, and then obviously if they win that game from any other
yep.
game following that, we'll also have coverage from the women's tournament. They're a 3 seed. They'll get to host the first 2 rounds of the tournament. They play on Saturday, and if they win, they play on Monday. We'll have coverage from that as well. Appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, make sure to like and subscribe here at this OU Insider YouTube channel, or if you're not a VIP member over at OUinsider.com, never a better time to sign up than right now. Appreciate you, Brody, as always. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll see you guys next time on In the Paint. Until then, see you next time.